Welcome to Finding You Now. I'm your host, Amanda Ashworth, and on today's show, we have Holly Matthews. Holly's story is incredible. I feel like you've led a life of many. That she's a former actress, turned singer, turned author, TEDx speaker, and her story, although it has a huge amount of pain in, it's one of the most incredible and inspiring stories I've come across. So, Holly, welcome.
Thank you so much. I think it is very, very true. When I hear my own biography and I look at my own stuff and I look back, it always makes even me, as the person who lived it, go, there have been many lives that in one lifetime somehow. It is a lot of stuff. And you're right, there has been some highs and some very, very difficult lows. And I talk about all of it. And I think that's
Yeah.
what we should do and see, I think it's always the best way. I think when we talk about things, people can feel seen and heard and possibly even see themselves in some of the stuff that we'll talk about.
Incredible. So you were a child actress.
I was 11 years old when I started TV acting, and my mum worked at a bank. My dad was a welder. I did not come from some stagey, stage school family from the northeast of England. There was no there was no drama schools or any of that, but there was a TV show called Byker Grove, which was very, very popular. Some of your
I
listeners
remember
will
it.
know that. Yeah, it was iconic, and people still, it weirdly comes up probably once a week still, all of these years later, mostly because of my accent as well. But people just feel really fondly about the show. And so for me, it was, I mean, I don't even know how I ended up wanting to be an actor, to be quite honest. But if I were to unpick all of that, I would probably say I was a weird child. Like, I was a weird child. I was undiagnosed neurodivergent. I was just a weird kid. I like to do weird stuff. I'd set my own and sing and write and be creative. And my parents were like, "Meh, she's a bit weird and she can talk a lot. And, maybe that'd be somewhere to put that." So they took me to like a Saturday morning like club that did acting. And I just hooked into it and was like, this, I want to do all of it. And by the time I was like 7, I was telling everybody that I wanted to go to RADA, the drama school in London, very prestigious. I went to go to RADA, that I was going to work with Steven Spielberg. And anywhere I went, I would just tell people, my name's Holly and I'm an actress. And I had zero doubt at all, because at that age, people don't tell you that stuff. There's no doubt. There's no social limits that are put on you. So I was like, I'm an actress, that's what's going to happen. And then when I heard about the show Byker Grove, my dad contacted the casting. I mean, it used to be like in the local paper, they would look for local people. It was so not, there's nothing starry about it. And so he was put in touch with the casting director, and then they said, we'll get her to write a letter. And so at 10, I wrote this letter. And I actually got given it on my 30th birthday. It was blown up on a canvas. It must have found, I mean, I didn't even think we had a computer at all at the time, but apparently we did. And there's this letter, and it's so funny. It's like, my name is Holly. I'm an actress. I've got brown hair, which I'd coloured it in brown. So you could and green eyes. And I'd done that in green. And I'm an actress. And I'd put on it as well, I am not shy one bit. I'm not shy, just so you know, not shy one bit. And then at the very bottom, I put, please write back quickly. And they did get me in for an audition. And I auditioned about 6 times, didn't get the part, but wasn't even disheartened by that. Was just, when that happened, I remember thinking, because I'd been to the set, I'd met producers, and I'd been working with some of the actors. It was actually the part of somebody's sister who was already established. So it was more about look, probably, than any, like, as in the look of you, than anything. And I remember getting home and thinking, so it's doable. Like, I got that far. It's doable. It wasn't like an adult brain where you go, well, that's it, then I'm giving up. It wasn't that limit. It was just, okay, so I got that. So then it's doable. How do we do it? How do we find a way? And 6 months later, they wrote a part in for me. And so that's how I went into that world. And I love it. Being on camera, being on set is my safe place. When I was growing up and being that kid, the kid off the telly and going to normal school, that was not a safe place for me. Like, that was where I was the weird kid who was on telly, and it was hard. Whereas when I was on set, I could be in my zone of genius. I was in that creative space. I was around people that were weird. I was around people that would do creative stuff. And so I never thought I would do anything else. Like, I always thought I would just be in that industry. And for a time, that's all I was doing. I was doing Waterloo Road and Doctors and Casualty and all of kind of UK TV faves, I guess. And I was loving it. And I was a job, what you would class as a job in actor. So I was able to be, in different places, doing different things, modeling, dancing, acting, singing, very much immersed in the industry, and I just loved it. And the only thing that kind of shifted for me as I got older and then became a mum was that I didn't like, and probably a lot of your listeners will get this, I didn't like not having control of my own life. And in the world of acting, you are relying, although less so now than ever before, you are relying on somebody else to still give you that role. You're knocking on those doors, and I just disliked it, and I wanted to take that power back. So I kind of fell into entrepreneurship as a way to go, I'm taking back some control. I've never had a proper job other than, a few waitressing jobs here and there or bar work. And I just wanted to find ways that between acting jobs, I could take control. So I kind of started to go into, everything from selling t-shirts to, all kinds of, hustle stuff to try and make the money. But I love the control of being, in control of my own destiny and being able to do what I wanted to do. So that was probably how I started to kind of bring in other things outside of acting. But sorry,
And
Karen.
how old were you by this stage?
So I reckon once I started to kind of dabble in that in my sort of early 20s. I started to think, well, what could I do outside of acting? Because for a time I went to drama school for a year. I went to drama school, and then I left. I was sneaking off to audition all the time, and I got a part on Waterloo Road. And so I packed my bags and I was off up to Manchester, and I left drama school. But during that short time when I was there, at drama school, you're there like, sometimes 12 hours a day. It's really intense. So to actually have to make money around that, and that time was in the infancy of us really understanding the power of online work, online marketing and social media. It was very early, like nobody was really doing that. And so I was trying to find work around that. And I did the weirdest things. Like where I lived in Essex at the time. And I was like, I put loads of flyers through people's doors, like, I'll do cleaning, I'll do this. And I ended up working for this psychiatrist in his studio. And he was like, would you like type my book for me? I'll dictate it. I've got no experience in that, but it doesn't matter, does it? He was like, I think it was like a tenner an hour at the time, which was decent. And I'm like, right, okay. So I'm sat in this guy's essentially shed, and I would type stuff, and then he would give me other stuff to like copy. But in there as well was all his psychology books. So most of the time that I was in there, I was just reading the psychology books and just doing that, because that was always an interest for me, always. And in the end with that job, my dad definitely said, I'm going to pay you to stop going there. It's really weird. You're sitting in a man's shed. It's just odd. There's a weird vibe about all of it. Please stop doing it. So I was just always, and I always have, tried to find ways to make my life work on my terms. And I was going to say I'm lucky enough, but it's not luck. I have worked at that. I have made a decision to do that. And there have been times when I've been winning and the times when I haven't. But I think in terms of shifting more into that space was when I became a parent. So I was 26 when I had my first. And once that happens, you can't be auditioning. I did try, but I got cast in a film. I got cast in this film. It was called Sket. It was a really good film, London-based film with Ashley Walters and a few other sort of London actors. And I got cast as this like rough London kid. But I was supposed to be in the film punched in the stomach by Ashley Walters in one of the scenes. Right. I was pregnant, so they were like, "Yeah, I'm like trying to like get past that." I'm like, "It'll be fine. We could just do it to this." And they're like, "No, insurance is not going to let us fake punch you in the pregnant stomach." So no. So once I was, with child, I started to go, how can I be around my kids? How can I be at home and still make things work and still be excited by what I do? Because at that time, I couldn't really see, anything past acting in the entertainment industry. I just didn't know what else would interest me, I guess.
Well, it'd
And
obviously
yeah,
been
so it
such
kind
a
of just,
well, it'd obviously been such a big part of your life for such a long time. But you talked there about it sounds like very much that you're willing to try your hand at anything and give something a go. How do other people respond to that? The fact that you're not just within this box.
that, yeah, I guess for me in some respect I am, because there's always been Holly's doing something weird. Like, I think most for me in lots of ways it's been easier for me to be like that because I haven't ever not had something else going on. I think when I meet people who've gone a traditional route, it's hard for them to understand how I do what I do. I mean, it is for me sometimes. And I think there was definitely a time for my parents where there was this constant worry of, like, does she need to have something more secure here? Because I was always just like, I just found a way. Like, I never worried about it though, which is interesting. It's only really, as I've got, as you get to a little bit older and your kids and all of that, like, as you get older, you become aware and maybe you've got mortgages and a bit more responsibility where you start thinking, I need to make sure everything is running a bit smoother. I think most of my life I have had people just think I'm relentless, and that is not true. That's not
Yeah.
true. It's but there's some magic in that as well. I try to be linear at times in my life, and it just doesn't, it's not the way I'm wired. And so certainly in the last few years I've not fought that as much. I've just went, okay, so we're going to go with the chaos this month, and that's just how we are. And it somehow works, it somehow pulls itself together. And I think a lot of that is what you just said. I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to start again. I don't have a big ego, and I don't think I don't think I'm better than anyone. I don't think I'm better than starting again. I don't think I'm better than retraining. I just think I know what I want. I know what my values are and what is important for me, which the biggest driver for me is freedom. So if your
Right.
driver is something like that, then you find a way to still be able to be yourself and do your own thing. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not external things that really drive me, other than food in the fridge and a roof over your head. It's more for me the fact I want to wake up and have nobody tell me what to do.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so if we then kind of fast forward a bit to you meeting and marrying Ross and then having children,
Yeah.
then kind of your life obviously had kind of all come together.
Yeah. So Ross and I met, and it, we met on, I'll tell you this quickly, but I was with somebody else. I had a mortgage, a dog, and I'd been with that person for 6 years. And it wasn't working. Let's be really, really, this was not like a harmonious relationship, but it was, and I'm such a loyal person. Like, none of what I'm going to say next really made sense, other than I'm very impulsive. When I make a decision, it's happening.
Okay.
And I met Ross on a job that I was doing between acting jobs. It was for PIMS. So I used to do a lot of promotional work where you do, like, giving out free stuff and chatting. Used to do loads of that. I met Ross, and the minute we met, there was something there. Our backgrounds, although different, there was lots of commonalities. So Ross's dad was a footballer. His brother, he'd grown up on a level of a pedestal because people in his area knew who he was. His dad played for Villa and Sheffield Wednesday. I'd always grown up with people knowing who I was a lot of the time when I went into different spaces. So he'd kind of grown up with that as well. He was autistic. I've got ADHD. And so there was probably that kind of neurodivergent like thing. Neither of us knew that at that time, though, in fairness. But we met, and there was just this kind of it was a connection that I've not, I had not experienced at that point. Like, I hadn't ever met where you meet somebody and you're like, I don't want to not be with this person. And so we met on this one day. We worked together one day. The next day I went back to Essex and I split up with the partner I was with. I didn't drive at the time, so I got on a bus, and the mega bus, a really cheap bus coach, to Coventry, where he lived in the Midlands, which is a couple of hours away. And I pretty much didn't come back. And everybody was like, you know, everyone was like, this is a bad decision. She shouldn't be doing it. And we kind of got there and we were so straight talking with each other. We just went, you know, if it doesn't work out, then just be dead honest with each other. And I remember I went to his house and I was carrying, you know, a case backwards and forwards all the time. And he went, I'll tell you what, his dad had a shop. And he went, I'll tell you what, I'll go and get a rail from my dad's shop and then you can put your stuff on there. And then it's not like a wardrobe or anything. So if we don't like each other after a bit, then we'll just take the rail away. It's no big deal. And we were, from the second we met, barely apart. We just got on. His friends called us Rolly. We were just together, and not in a way that was like needy or like we always said we were two lone wolves that somehow came together, two really staunchly independent people who wanted to do their things in their own way. But when we met, we somehow managed to be just, it worked. And so when we got to the point of having kids and all of that, we spent our lives, Ross was, you know, had his own business and property, and we just spent our lives pottering around together, enjoying each other's company, drinking cups of tea, having a laugh. You know, Ross's his like mantra was, those that play together stay together. And we just laughed, and there was no, you know, we'd have a row with each other, but everything was so straight. There was no conversation that we couldn't have with each other. And we were when we were, I think it was, hang on, how many years were we in together? So we got married as well, obviously, but we got married, didn't tell anyone. We just got married on our own, and in hoodies and trainers and stuff, and then like text everyone and sent them a picture, and everyone was very cross about that. So we went for a cup of tea afterwards and a scone, and then we just went back to work, whatever we were up to that day. And then everyone thought that was an acting job. So I like put it on social media, I've got married, and everyone was like, yeah, all right, of course you have. And I was like, no, I actually did get married. So that was me and Ross. Like we had fun together, and we did things in our own way. And it wasn't always conventional, or, you know, it was, you know, we were both entrepreneurial, so we were always doing something. And there was a point where, as you say, you know, if you'd have looked at my life, you'd have seen this huge future for us together, 2 young kids. Texas had just been born, Brooke, my older one, and we'd had a couple of years with Brooke. And then in 2014, Ross was diagnosed with brain cancer, and everything changed. And within that, you know, from the very moment that we were given that diagnosis, it was bad. Like, brain cancer is never what you want to hear, but there was no, oh, it's just a tumor. It was cancerous. It was the worst. It was rare. It was massive. For a time, there was just nothing. Like, I mean, there was no kind of anything to hook onto, other than both me and Ross were, you know, both optimistic people, both willing to hit life head on, you know, both the kind of characters that look the tiger in the eye. And so when cancer came, we were like, all right, what do we do? And a lot of the time we would just say, okay, so what's next? Like, what do we do next here? And for a time there were options. And for 3.5 years, we had Ross, chemo, radio, 2 brain surgeries, all of the stuff that comes with brain cancer, seizures, and, you know, all the tablets, all the things, and a complete lifestyle shift. And in 2017, Ross couldn't keep that cancer at bay, and he died. And again, my world completely changed and everything shifted. But I have to say that through all of it, and I think this comes down to when we look at what's important to us and what drives us, and also my and Ross's kind of understanding of life, that none of it really makes sense. It's a massive game. I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't believe in God. So I just believe that we do our best with where we are right now. We live your life in the way you want to live it, be good to people, and that's your lot. That's my ethos. It's not everybody's, but that gives me comfort. It doesn't give me comfort to do this a million times over. I just
Yeah.
want to have one go at it and give it my best shot. And Ross was the same. Ross was a very loud, staunch atheist, and his autistic brain was very literal, black and white. And he's like, I'm dead or I'm alive. They
Yeah.
tell me I've got cancer. I can't feel it. Like he was like, if there's anyone's going to be able to take this, it's me. And so when Ross was diagnosed, I really remember making a conscious effort in my mind to go, well, what do you want to do here? Like, you can give up, like you can give
Mm.
up and everyone will give you a pass, or you can find a way. And that doesn't mean like stiff upper lip. That doesn't mean being, toxic positivity. That means crying. That means being mad as hell at times. That means not getting it right all the time. But it also means that driving force of, I want to be happy. I want to make a nice life for my kids. And in amongst initially, cancer stuff, I found happy. We found happy. And then when Ross died, I hit a similar point where Ross was in a hospice for a time, and there was a lot of press around Ross's death, more so than I've had lots of press in my life where my world has been in the public eye, but this was intrusive on another level, where there was paparazzi at the funeral and there was constant stories everywhere. And it felt like the world was watching me go through the worst time of my life. And again, I took charge of that and I started vlogging, because then it was in my control to be able to talk about what I wanted to talk about and put my side across and how I saw it. But I remember being in the hospice where I started to do what busy brained people do and look for answers of, what's it like when somebody dies? What's it like? What do they look like? What do they do? What do I do? What happens next? What have other widows done? I knew Ross was going to die, and everything was so miserable. Everything was so dire. And it just made me go, absolutely not. Like, that will not be our story. That will not be my story. And I had to really check myself and go, you've not lived your life like other people do ever. Like, you've not done it the right way, the traditional way. So why are you trying to force yourself into grieving in a way that makes sense to other people? And that, again, it was a conscious choice of this new stage for us.
And how old were you at that point, and how old were the girls?
I was 32 when Ross died, and the girls were 4 and 6. So they were
So
really young.
it's really young. And what I find incredible about that is just that you were able to find happiness in, because like my stepdaughter is in remission for cancer, and it's all consuming when you're having
Mm,
treatment.
yeah.
So to have that balance of life, and to be able to create that is incredible. But I think what's so inspiring about your story is that you didn't just go into victim mode. You
No.
didn't just, you carried on, and from that you've created something amazing.
Yeah, I don't sit. I mean, I'm not saying we never sit in victim mode. Sometimes we do feel sorry for ourselves, and that's okay. Like, I often say to my clients, some days are sit in your pants and have a cry and eat chicken nuggets. Like, it's all right. Like, those days are important as well. So I'd never want anyone to look at my story and think, well, she never cried. I've been a hot mess just like everybody else, and I've done all of the normal stuff that we do when we grieve. But it goes back to that kind of driving force of, what do you want here? Like, what do you want? And I can sit in victim mode if I want, and the world would give me a pass, but then I don't win by staying there. Like, I don't win by being in victim mode. I'm just stuck in victim mode. And initially, when somebody dies or when you go through a hard time, you will get a pass off people, and people will get around you. But actually, that wears thin for everybody, and then you are disempowering yourself. So I did know that. And in terms of self-development stuff, I'd done that since I was really young. So in the background of, it wasn't anything I ever thought I would do as a job, because I was focused on acting. But from being like, when I started in TV, I was fascinated by people's minds. That's why I enjoyed it. That's why I loved it. I was fascinated by psychology, by how our minds worked. And I think if I were to look back, it probably was because I was neurodivergent and because I was seeing the world slightly differently and I was trying to fit in and it didn't make sense. And sometimes I would feel like I was behind this glass window that everybody else understood kind of what they were doing and I saw it differently. And I think naturally I started to look for answers. So self-development was always in the background for me. I just did it for myself. I was always doing coaching courses or reading psychology books. I knew the stuff. So by the time I was at a stage where Ross had cancer, it was kind of that transition for me because I pulled back from acting. And I can tell you now, it was the weirdest thing. And maybe anyone who's gone through big stuff like that, grief or their own ill health or death or whatever, when something big happens, there can be such a shift in your psyche that you don't go back. And I haven't. I had that moment of, I don't know why I wanted to do this ever. And it makes no sense to me that I ever wanted to be an actor. It was so weird. It was such a shift in who I'd been and harder for other people probably than me. But what happened is I pulled back. I mean, I had just finished doing BBC Casualty. It was a big storyline. There was lots of offers on the table. I'd just booked a film. It was a new stage for me when Ross first got diagnosed. Phoned my agent, was like, I'm done. Just take me off everything. I don't want to do anything. I'm focused on this. But during that time, those 3.5 years with Ross and with us, and you know, I still want to do something. I still want to feel the purpose of the things that I do. And I naturally started to talk about self-development and, you know, to help people around me largely. You know, people, I could see where there was issues. I could see things, you know, people would want to tell me, they would want to tell Ross how he was going to feel when he had chemotherapy. And I was like, you're not going to tell him anything. He's going to make his own decision on what his story is. And you're going to stop talking about it. We didn't talk about cancer. We didn't sit and talk about it. Ross didn't know what symptoms he was supposed to have. And he largely didn't have them. And I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but I'm saying that he didn't know because he didn't read about it and he just lived his life. And his oncologist, he would go into and they'd be like, I don't know how you are like you are. He would come out of radiotherapy or chemo and he would go and play football or be papering in the kids' rooms. And I don't think that was an accident. I think that was because Ross didn't immerse himself in any of it. He refused, you know, not because it was even conscious for Ross. I think Ross being autistic meant he did always see that he always did his own thing. So I think he just was like, I just want to live. Like, I'm not looking at what you're telling me I'm supposed to be doing. So we found that joy in that decision. We decided to just focus on us. And for me, in terms of self-development, in it becoming my work, it was such an organic progression for me that I just started to talk about it. And then there was a point, you know, there was probably about a year where the cancer was still and it was not doing that much and we were just upkeeping. So we had a stillness. I mean, our lives were completely different, you know, in terms of the dynamics of what people could do. You know, Ross couldn't drive, for example. That's a huge thing. Even in itself, there was a worry about having him on his own with the kids in case he had a seizure or something like that, because they were still there. So there was a lot of difference and there was a lot of us being at home together, but we both understood each other. We both just found a way around this stuff. And that, I think, really helped. And for me, in terms of moving into a coaching space of doing the self-development, it was a really good thing to me to put my emotions into and my busy brain into. It was something to do. It felt purposeful. It felt like taking the bad and doing something with it. That felt like there was something good. And when Ross died, it then went into the new stage, which is the Happy Me project, which is my current work. And again, that was an absolute answer to what was happening in the world. And for me, and it was a kind of, I was sat in, was it after? I know it was after. I think I'd started to think about it before, but I was getting so many messages off people, you know, because of the social media, because of the press that was happening. And people wanted to know, how the hell is she doing what she's doing when I can't cope with my kids being a pain in the arse and the washing? And I can't imagine that. And so I was getting lots of messages, and obviously at that time I couldn't do one-on-one stuff or anything. I just wasn't in that space to be able to do that. And I'd kind of the years previously started to understand about, you know, how to create things online and how to do all of that stuff. So within the first few months of Ross dying, and also because I really care about people, like I don't want to just palm someone off with a quick message on Facebook when someone asks, like I care, like it's not like it drives me. Like when I see people and I, you know, and you'll get it yourself, I see what they sometimes can't see in themselves. And it drives me like an obsession to help them have the right tools to live their life, because I can see their brilliance. I see the brilliance in people every day, and I can see they don't see it. And so I don't want to palm someone off because they're too important. Their life is too important. I've already said in my worldview, I don't believe you get another shot. So that's my worldview. So that drives me to go, you're wasting time here. Like you're too good to be doing that. So putting the Happy Me project together, initially it was an online course, a £30 course. There was no pomp, ceremony, nothing pretty about putting it together. I was sat with my phone at the bottom of the stairs recording stuff. There weren't no microphones. There was nothing pretty about any of it. So when you're listening to this, if you are a business owner and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I've got to have all of the gear before, no, you don't.
Branding, website, everything in place.
No, just put something together. And if it's meant to be, if it's something that your audience gravitates towards, they'll get it regardless. And so I put that out in the world. There was no big launch strategy. There was no email thing. It wasn't that pretty. And I put it out there. And within a few days, I started to see like people, you know, 100 people going through. Then I would see like stuff like, and I kept going, oh my God, I was getting such a kick. I was like, oh my God, like 200 people have just signed up for it. Oh my God, like by the end of that year, you know, I mean, I don't even know. I'd stopped counting. By the end of that year, Ross died in the July. By the end of that year, I was in a space, probably a lot of it through adrenaline at that stage of grief. But I was at a stage where I wanted to people, and I then started to do in-person events for the same name. Since that point, over the last 6 years, nearly 6 years now, the Happy Me project has taken on a space of its own, and it's really become bigger than what I anticipated, but in the best way. And it has gone from being this little course I created at the bottom of my stairs in a hurry, like, and pushed out into the world, to now being a life coaching membership, a podcast, a best-selling book, and events, and all sorts of merchandise, and all of the things that come with it. And for me, the Happy Me project is about trying to find everyday stuff that we can do to help our minds. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a case of us getting to crisis before we are able to get support and to get help. And I also don't want, and this has always been something for me, I don't want my work to be at such a high price point that is not accessible to everybody. So I always try to make sure there are options within my work. You can just take my free stuff on social media. I give a ton of value on there. Like there's tons. The podcast, it's free. It's there. It's not even free for me to make, but it's there. And, you know, it's completely inconsistent. So, you know, don't expect me to be there every week, but it's there. But all of that, like for me, is how can I help people to see, you know, to take what they need, and the rest they can leave. That's all right. But it came from a very organic place of me understanding on a different level than I had done before that life can be really, really hard, and you need the tools to get through it. And it's still that drives me.
And so what would you say now the mission is kind of going forward for the Happy Me project?
Well, the mission for me is to reach as many people as possible and give them almost a menu of ideas that they can filter through their own worldview and try and experiment with. And that for me looks like more books that will be coming out. It looks like Happy Me TV. I certainly want to go back into a TV space, and I'm still lucky enough that I get to be on TV and on radio and magazines and stuff now and then. But I want to take charge of that. And my mission is to teach people to feel more, well, teach people skills that they can explore so that they can feel more happy and less crappy. And so they can live a life that feels good. Like, that's it. Like, one of my favorite quotes, and it's by Bob Dylan. When we think about success, people will often say, like, what does success look like? And, success looks different to everybody, of course. And, some people it's Lamborghinis and fancy cars and shoes and all of that stuff. And some people it's living in a tree and in the woods. I don't know, right? Everybody's different. But this quote I always go back to because I just think it's dead simple. And he said, I don't know where he said it, but I heard it. It might not even be him, I don't know. But I heard it and I liked it and I'm sticking with it. And it was, a man is successful, or a woman, a man is successful when he wakes up every day and and then he goes to bed at night, and in between he does whatever he wants.
Yeah.
That to me is success, and we can all add our own flavor, our own version of that into whatever feels good to us. But so many people aren't doing that, and so many people are getting to that point where they get stuck with the hard stuff that we have to deal with as humans.
Yeah. I think there's two things there. I think one, we're not taught the tools from definitely education does not teach you the tools. And as parents, we shy away from some of the big topics with our children. So we try to protect them so much that we don't allow them to develop their own coping mechanisms. And the second thing is society talks a lot about what success is. And it is a pile of poo, because that is not the road to happiness.
No, it's all very, when we look online and what we get told, it's all very external. And I'm certainly not saying that you can't have those things and love them. Like, if you love cars, you love shoes, like, that's cool as well. Like, it's just not important. Like, it's not, when it comes down to it, when you actually hit a point where somebody that you love is going to die or dies, or somebody that you love is suffering or you're suffering, when that happens, you couldn't care at all about that stuff. All you care about is the connection and the love, and that's it. Like, it doesn't matter. I felt similar during the pandemic when we went into lockdown. I remember having a similar sort of feeling. It was a weird time for everybody. It was a collective space of grief. It was a collective space of pain. It was, all of that stuff was so felt, across the world. And I remember a similar thing there, where I looked at my house and I understood my privilege. I understood I had a house, a garden, 2 amazing kids. I wasn't on my own. All of the privilege, I got it, right? But I remember just looking around my house and just thinking, I can't eat the telly. I can't, like, if I can't get food, or I can't, because at the time, early doors, we were really struggling to get things and get out of the house, and we didn't know what was happening. And I just thought, none of this really matters, because the only things that matter are me and my kids right now. Like, that's, and the health of my family outside of these walls. Like, that's the only thing that matters. And so you're right. Like, we don't get taught that stuff, and we get taught to distract from our feelings. We get taught that all of the things that the trappings of success are what matter, when it just doesn't. I'm not saying you can't like that stuff. I'm not dismissing that. That's, life is fun. You can do what you want with it, right? But equally, if that's what's driving you, that's what's important, it's never going to be enough. You're always going to be chasing.
And I think I think more and more we're not valuing connection enough. And material things are never going to bring you ultimate happiness. So with your girls, how did you navigate that and kind of give them the tools to be able to cope?
Pure honesty, uncomfortable, terrifying honesty from the start. My kids are smart. They grew up with me and my husband are, both being very direct, very honest, talking to them like, on a kid level, but also, treating them with respect as little people. And I remember when we knew Ross was dying, I remember having everybody's ear. Everybody's like wanting to tell me how I should be doing things with the kids. And I knew instinctively that I needed, certainly to my oldest, needed to speak to her, because I could see it was on the tip of her tongue, asking what was happening, literally the words. I knew she was, and I kept thinking while I was mulling over, how the hell how the hell do you tell your child this? How do you tell your children this? Like, this is, I mean, that is, for me, is the worst thing that I've ever had to do in my entire life. And I spoke to, very kindly, Jeff Brazier, who was the partner of Jade Goody, who was on Big Brother. Some of the UK people will know who she is, maybe further afield. And when she died of cancer, and her two kids obviously were young when she died. I think they were a similar age to my girls. And Jeff kindly spoke to me about his experience and offered his advice. And he said to me, of course, like I said, I feel like I need to tell the girls now, because it was brain cancer as well. It was, you lose the person before you do. It's a bit like dementia, because they start to change. It's pushing on parts of their brain. It becomes not them. And I felt at this point that Ross, I mean, other people could pretend, but I could see there was problems. Ross wasn't functioning as Ross. There was moments of him, but it wasn't quite there. And so I was worried that we'd get to a point where, I'd tell, he'd be there and part of that conversation, and he'd bark like a dog. Like, genuinely, that's the kind of things that can happen when you've got an issue with your brain. And so Jeff kindly talked to me about his experience, and he said to me, you're right, like, you need to tell them. They need to know. They need to say what they need to say. They need to say sorry. They might have felt like they've done something. They need to say goodbye. They need to say those things, the same as we do as adults, the same things. Those little children, they've got the same feeling. And so I digested that conversation. And then the night before, I thought I was going to throw up, like, just the thought of having to tell the girls that. And I went to the hospital with the girls, and I remember I started to kind of like say it, and I was saying, no, we don't know when, which is true. We didn't at the time. We didn't have a timeline, because how can you? And it was early. And I remember Brooke, my oldest, went, just say it. I know what you're going to say. And she was like 6 at the time. And I explained, and obviously they were devastated. And then they do what kids do. They go and play, and they give them sweets, and they move. It's not that they move forward. They just live very much in the moment. I'm not a fan of saying kids are just resilient, because they're as resilient as we are, and they feel the same feelings as we do. It's not a case of, aren't they great, and they move on. They don't. It doesn't. It's the same as us. It's it's a process.
Well, I think it's really important to make sure that they don't internalize how they're feeling, and by not allowing them to express how they feel, you don't know the damage.
For sure, like, and a lot of the people that I spoke to, I spoke to lots of adults who had parents who died when they were younger, and I wanted to understand what can I do, like, how do I make this in any way easier than what's about to happen. And everyone I spoke to said the pain came from people ignoring the fact that they felt the same. The pain came from not speaking about it and not being honest. So I committed to myself, I would be honest. Whatever they asked me, they get an answer from me. And that wasn't comfortable for everybody around me. I also did I put a video together when we told the girls, and I recorded this video of me saying, right, this is what I've said to the girls. I basically said in the video, if you're getting this video, you are likely to be around my kids. And I'm telling you what I've told them, and I'm telling you what I will expect of you and what I won't. And I said, this is what I've said. At that stage, Brooke, my oldest, any person she saw, she was going, did you know my dad's going to die? Every time. That was her first thing. So I've said, you better get ready for it. You better get an answer ready. You better get comfortable with it, because this is not about you right now. It's about them kids. So you as an adult, deal with your shit. And so I said in this video, this is what I'm going to say. And I said, I have asked them what they believe about an afterlife. That is their decision to make. It is not your decision. Do not tell them your version of a heaven or a God or a sky God, or 20 years of living it over and over again. Do not tell those girls your version of it. It's not your right to do that. It's not mine either. My girls know, even now, they know I don't believe in God, but I have absolutely I've talked to them about all people's different gods and what they believe and different options. And I've said, you can believe whatever you want that gives you comfort. It is not, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what the answer is. And if it feels good to you, then it feels good to you. And so and I sent that to teachers, to everyone, and it was brutal. It was honest, what it was. And with the girls, over those, I then ended up in the hospice. My sister stayed with the kids. So there was a time for the girls when I wasn't there and Ross wasn't there for a month. before he died. The girls came into the hospice a few times, and then there was a point for me where it wasn't okay for them to be there.
Yeah.
It was a point where he wasn't making sense. It wasn't a good memory. You're watching somebody die. He doesn't look well. It's scary. And I knew it and I felt it. And they didn't know it, but after that, it was, he went to sleep after that, and he was just, he wasn't there. And so it was the right time to have done it. And I remember in the hospice, Brooke called me, my oldest, and she said, Mum, I really want you to come home. I really miss you. And obviously that was horrendous. And I was like, I know, darling. And she said, but she asked me whether her dad would come out of the hospice, and I said no. And she said, will he die in there? And I said, yeah. And then she said she missed me, and she said, I really want you to come home, but I know that if you come home, it means Dad's dead. And I was like, this is a 6-year-old with like this wisdom and this understanding, and this is why we can't kid our kids. Like, they know it, they're smart, doesn't matter what age are, they've got an understanding. Even, and if you don't talk to them about it, they will think about things anyway. They will do all of those things. My nieces and nephews were on Google. Like, it was, you can't kid kids. If you bullshit your children, you're kidding only yourself, because they are not being kidded. And so when he died, and I went home, and again, Jeff Brazier was very kind enough to message me beforehand, and he said to me, look, just make it something nice, make it somehow positive, get balloons, do something fun, bring sweet, don't make it don't make it on top of what is bad even worse. And I went in, the kids were like super excited to see me because they'd forgot, and then I had to tell them, and we cried. And then we decided we would draw. And I said, okay, let's do some art. And we sat down at the table. And I remember my oldest drawing a picture of all the family. And she drew, and, I've got it somewhere, but she drew Ross a little bit away from everybody. And it was definitely subconscious. Like, it wasn't a conscious thing, but I think it was her way of making sense of what had just been said to her. And in terms of going forward from that point, I've had to answer the most brutal questions that you will imagine. I've had to, and still do sometimes, have to talk about Ross dying with them, and each stage of everything that happened within that. There have been times when they've believed they gave him cancer, that somebody else gave, they've believed that they stood on his toe once and it gave them cancer. Yeah. I've had to explain things, and sometimes it's been funny, like there was a time, explaining that their dad was cremated and what that means. And that's a horrible explanation to explain if you don't, it's a weird thing to have to explain. And I thought I'd done a great job of it, until one day I was burning some incense, and some of the incense ash had fallen onto the table. And I went like that and put it in the bin. And Texas burst into tears, my youngest, and she went, don't do that, it's Dad. And I was like, what? Oh, okay, we need another conversation about that, because that is not your dad. But jokes aside about that, we deal with a lot of it even now. A lot of it is dealt with absolutely brutal humor, gallows humor, like raw, harsh. We are very, very direct in my family. This is a very neurospicy household. We are straight talking, passionate. We have we have been through it with the kids. It is not a pretty thing. I can't sit here and say to you that it has been easy. It hasn't. And there will be different bits that are easier, and there will be different bits that are harder, just like all of our grief. Nighttime has been difficult, as it is with adults, and all of those things. But honesty and giving them space to talk and ask anything, even if it makes me uncomfortable, that's the best thing that I can give them. Like, that's all I can give them. And also my own tears and my own, I will even now say to the girls, I had a really sad day today. Like, this made me feel sad. It made me think about Dad, and it made me feel so upset. And that's allowed to be okay. And I think we've really created that environment.
And so, when were you diagnosed with ADHD?
I was diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago, something like that. It was something that had been said to me prior to that, when I was younger, but I dismissed it because we did not live in the age of knowledge about how that looked. And I kind of thought, how rude. Why would you say that to somebody? But I've always been in spaces where there's been like people who knew about the mind in various forms. And so it was just sort of said to me, it was said to me a couple of times over the years when my daughter was in the exploration of autism stuff, ADHD stuff was coming into it as well. And it was kind of then that I started to see that actually maybe the people that had said it prior to it were probably right. And because I'm interested in my own mind, I don't shy away from that stuff. And I think it's very important we know ourselves, whatever that is, even if it's not a diagnosis. This is why self-development is so important. But if you are missing a piece of that puzzle, which for some people will be a diagnosis of many things, then you may be doing something in a way that isn't suitable for how you work. And for me, the understanding of that, and certainly reflecting back on everything, I can see why things were how they were. And it has allowed me to give myself a better framework for how I work, and just support myself in a different way. And I know, I personally believe the conversation around neurodivergence will die down and people will realize that it's just always been the way. Like, we've always had autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyspraxic people in the world. It isn't suddenly there's loads. That's a ridiculous statement. It's
No,
just
but so there's obviously in the UK recently, there's been quite a lot of documentaries and publicity around
yeah.
it. And so my nephew has ADHD, and I
Okay.
very much see it as a superpower
Yeah.
and a strength, but
Yeah.
it's grossly misunderstood,
Yeah.
which also means that he's been misunderstood for most of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And recently the Panorama documentary
Mm-hmm.
around the privatization of misdiagnosis.
Yeah.
Where do you think? So, what do you think's happening that almost people want to attach that label to them because that longing to fit somewhere?
Yeah, I think the reality is there are more people that are neurodivergent than we realize. That's
Yeah.
just categorical, right? I think that's always been the case. I think there are. I don't think people, and this is something I think that documentary was crap, to be honest. And I've done a lot of talks on the BBC over the last month about it, a little bit talked out about it. But I also think there was elements of things within that are important, and that is that in the UK right now, across all forms of mental health and diagnosis, there is an issue with waiting lists and all of that. Unfortunately, whether it's private or whether it's NHS, if you don't go to the right places, you will not get
Yeah.
the right support. So my daughter has gone through an autism diagnosis. I did not go in there going, Brooke is autistic. In fact, I didn't see it at first. I was thinking it was grief. Like, I just thought all of these, I was working on each component part of the things. And, her dad's autistic. So like, it's not, again, it wasn't like it was like, it is very highly genetic, but it looks different in girls, it doesn't look the same. And so just, I was, as in all of that. So I think, yeah, I forgot. Oh, what I was going to say, yeah, that was, went off on a tangent there. But when Brooke was diagnosed, it was a hugely deep process. There was, because there was grief in play, because there was other things in play, I thought it was just going to be a perfect shitstorm. I thought we were going to just get to the point where they went, it's just loads of things creating all of this anxiety and stress and grief. That's what I thought might be the case. Autistic traits maybe chucked in. And I wasn't looking for, it has to be this. I was looking for, where should I point the car to get support? How can I best help my child here? And I think that's, most people are doing that, whether it's for their children or whether it's for themselves. I don't think that, in fact, what I'm going to say is, I don't care whether if somebody believes that they have ADHD or autism or whatever else, and it gives them a framework that supports them,
Yeah.
what's it got to do with anybody else?
Yeah.
Unless the only caveat to that is if you are seeking medication.
Yeah.
That's different because that's putting something in your body. Now, not to be honest, I would say the majority of people that I know that have ADHD aren't medicated.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing that I find, because I think what gets levied at people is you're trying to get benefits. Firstly, in terms of ADHD, really hard to get, like really hard to get, really unlikely that you will get benefits for ADHD. You have to be so severely impaired to get it for that. So let's just rule that out. And also, if the person has ADHD, they're not going to fill out the forms. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
At one point, and this is like, I'm a bit of a rant on it, but at one point I decided I would try and get help with my business because I do have impairments. I am medicated. I mean, we're recording this late at night, so later at night, my medication has worn off. It's like Cinderella when she goes back to rags. So it's a little late for me to, the medication's no longer keeping me still. But it does work for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But why would anybody go through that process? One, it's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive. I am in a position where I've been able to do that at a stretch. We are so lucky that we've been able to do that. My daughter's friend was diagnosed with autism through the NHS. Bear in mind, my daughter Brooke has had 6 months of assessments, both cognitive, both behavioral. Two different psychologists have to agree it when you go through that route. Like, it is an extensive process for that diagnosis. When her friend went through the NHS, it was 45 minutes and that was it. Now, that to me is negligent when it's a child. Yeah. If you are an adult and you are coming to your GP and you have read about autism, ADHD, and you associate that your world and you're like, that is me, and you go to it, nobody is going seeking out. So I don't, there's the kind of, it's cool to, I don't even know what that means. It's cool to have ADHD. I mean, I would very nicely disagree with it being a superpower. What I think the superpower is, because I think ADHD is a disorder. Like, I know that it wouldn't be a diagnosis for me if it wasn't impairing my life in some way. However, the superpower that people kind of see in neurodivergent people is our ability to find a way through the cracks, is our ability to find that around it. And by doing that, sometimes we find really cool ways that are different to the standard. And that's the cool bit. Like, that's the bit. But for the person with ADHD, for the person that has autism and is going around in a world that doesn't actually suit a lot of the way they work, that's not actually very fun. Like, that isn't fun. And so seeing a lot of the press, I'm sure it will die down, but I just think it's so unhelpful. And I have had, over the last few weeks, because of that documentary, some very, very upset people in my inbox. I've had a lot of people. And what I've done is to channel that into good stuff. So I am now working alongside a neurodivergent school for children who are school refusers, called Gaia Learning. It's here. It's around, I think they're around the world. It's an online space and they support neurodivergent children. And for me, it's how do I channel this into putting something together that can support my neurodivergent community. I certainly work in a way that is suitable for neurodivergent people. Even in my membership, I know I have quite a few different people who are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic. And within that space, I make sure that my work is as accessible as possible, different ways of learning, different styles, even my book itself. So my book, the way it's written is very good for neurodivergent people because each chapter is only 4 pages and there's bullet points and pullouts, and between, and if you can see it on the screen, there's gaps between each paragraph, so it's easier to read. And I say in the beginning of this book, like, you read it whatever way you want. Like, you flick through it, you draw in it, you highlight it, you read it upside down. You do it your own way. Don't let anybody tell you how to read something. And I want it to be accessible. And so for me, I've channeled that kind of rage in just silly headlines that don't understand how people feel in reality, and channeled it into something good and something positive. Because I just don't
That's
think,
amazing.
yeah, I just don't think adults seek out a diagnosis because it's fun. It's
But
expensive.
it's actually really interesting to see. So now I no longer read the UK press. Um,
Yeah,
it's very, because here there's very high rates of ADHD, but
right.
there's huge rates of entrepreneurs. So it makes sense that the children of entrepreneurs, that there would be a higher chance. So
Yeah.
it's just reported very, very differently here
Mhm.
to the way that it would be in the UK. But this conversation has been absolutely amazing. So where
Thank you.
can people find you on social?
Well, I hang out in all of the places, but I am hollymatthews.com/ all my stuff. I hang out a lot on Instagram. I do try on TikTok. I'm there. Come and follow me, because it will give me like credibility with my kids, and they don't care where else I am verified and all of that. They don't care. They're just like, have you got 1 million followers on TikTok? And if not, you're a loser. And I'm a loser to them. It doesn't matter how much TV you're at. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They're not impressed. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram. I do hang out on LinkedIn. I am on Twitter, but very, very rarely, because it's a scary world on Twitter. Everyone's very angry at each other. So I try not to hang out there for too long. But they can definitely let me know that they've come here from your podcast. They can get access to my book in all of the places around the world, Amazon, WH Smith, you can get it around the world. And my membership is available all the time. And you just drop me a message on any of the social media, and let me know you've been here. And for those that are watching, actually, I'm going to just chuck this in. This is a little bit of late night impulsivity for everyone, and you can put a link below for me. What I will do is, if they let me know, they message me on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, let me know they've come from here, I will give them a free month in my membership, where they can get access to all of the stuff. That's 6 days out of the week I go live in there. We do live life coaching. We do group monthly sessions. We have guest speakers in there. There's all the things. They will get access to that, but they can have a free month, and they just drop me a message somewhere and let me know that they've come from your podcast, and I will gift them a free month, and
That's
if they like it,
very
they can stay.
that's very generous. So thank you so much for your time.
You're
This has
welcome.
been incredible. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank